Hi folks, hope all's well and keeping safe, etc. A recent post on Facebook about soldering, and a gentleman said it must be witchcraft. It's definitely a black art and there's a dark side to it. Trust me, there isn't. Okay, I've been soldering for many years in all sorts of scenarios. But the first thing you must understand is, what's the objective? The objective is to join two metals together, basically. And to do that, they must both be at the same temperature. And then you introduce the solder and it joins the two together. The solder joint actually holds the two together. So, in this particular instance, the gentleman said he was having trouble with droppers to the track. So here I'd like to show you and demonstrate to you how actually simple it is. One of the main things that you see is when people don't use a flux. Their joint is also dirty. The cable is either too thick or it's insufficient for the job they're trying to do. The soldering iron is not hot enough. And all these things combined come to failure. Now, flux in this case, and this is my opinion, not an industry standard specifically, but I like to use a phosphoric acid flux. And when phosphoric acid is heated, it cleans the metal. And it cleans it sufficiently just to accept solder. Now, flux does two things. It cleans the metal and it also assists in solder flow. You don't have to get fluxed cored solder. It's not wholly necessary. You don't have to get lead-free solder. There are many solders out there, but a solder will do the job. So, the foe in this is dirt, a cold iron, and inaccessibility. What we have in front of us is a small piece of Pico streamlined track. It's nickel silver. It's a good metal. It's a good metal to solder to. And we also have a piece of wire. Now, this is a typical piece of wire used for droppers. It's 15 core of 0.02 millimeters, known as 15/02. And it's a thick wire, but it's not insurmountable if you've got a hot iron. Some warnings about hot irons: they will immediately damage any plastics. If it's left or dropped, or it's left to rest and it rolls away, it will, believe me, it will damage plastics. It could ruin a £150 model. So be very careful. Obviously, always remember that the pink bits are yours. They're yours. They're not supposed to get in the way of the job, but you will get burnt if a soldering iron touches you. Be very careful. And we're using an acid here, and this acid, particularly phosphoric acid, although it's highly diluted with water, it will cause skin burns. So be very careful with it. It's not going to be immediate, but over the next few days, if you've had some on your fingers, you might see a bit of patchy skin. So just be careful. Now then, back to the case in point. We're joining two metals together with solder. Okay, so let's have a look. The most common problem, as I said, is cold iron, solder, no flux. This is what happens. See that? Oh no, sorry, it's off camera. You see that? This is what happens. It's not adhering properly. Okay? I mean, that's just terrible. Let me go to, in fact, it's come off now, look. Let me go to the other end. And what I'm going to do here, I'm going to put some flux on it. Just wipe the flux on like that. Okay. You can use liquid flux, you can use flux paste. Doesn't really matter, flux paste is quite good actually. The one that plumbers use, Fry's flux, is actually quite good. But that brings another issue. Now look, watch the difference now when I put this solder onto a fluxed piece of metal. Do you see that? The flux ran straight down. Okay, that is now clean. The whole of the joint, the whole of the wire is now covered in solder. This side, nah. You've got exactly the same issue with your track. If you put cold iron with a bit of solder on, like that, you've got very, very little chance of it sticking. Can you see that? It just doesn't work, does it? And this is where a lot of people go wrong. There's flux on my, there's solder on my iron, but can we get it on here? Nah, not a hope in hell. Right, so what we're going to do, we're going to clean the joint, we're going to clean the rail first of all. And for this demonstration, I shall just use a piece of emery cloth. Let's just clean the edge of this rail here. You can scratch it with a screwdriver or a pin or a needle or anything you've got to hand really, but just get the contaminants off there, get the dirt off there. Okay, and you'll now see, if the camera picks it up, there's a nice area which is scratched and clean. Now we're going to put the flux on. Okay, and what we're going to do here is we're going to introduce a little bit of solder to the rail. Whoops, sorry, there we go. We're going to introduce a little bit of solder to the rail, thus. Oh, look at that. Solder straight away, straight on. No messing, nice and clean. And the flux did its job. Now we're going to get the cleaned, fluxed piece of wire. We'll bend it to shape. Let's just, where's my little pliers? Here they are. Let's just bend this to shape, hang on. We'll put a little kink in it like that, so I can demonstrate this. There we go. So now we've got a little kink in the wire. Imagine that's coming up through the baseboard and you've got your wire sticking out. Bend it down and introduce it to the rail like so. Okay. And just for a bit of security, what we're going to do here is just put a little bit of flux on there as well. And we're going to heat the two pieces of metal, the wire and the rail, like so, and immediately the solder flows on. There it is. Job done. So let's recap. No flux. An iron which isn't hot enough. That solder will not stick on that wire. Let's put some flux on. And this incidentally is called tinning. Let's just put that on there, like that. Some solder onto the wire, and voila. We now have a nice soldered joint. Okay. You come to your dirty track. That solder, look, it's just not sticking on there. It just won't go. And this is where People get so frustrated because they hold the iron on for ages and ages and ages, and it starts to melt the plastic. This iron has to be hot, very hot. The colder it is, the worse it will be. So, we're going to clean it. We're going to flux it. We're going to get a hot iron this time and put solder on. Look, the solder's flowed straight into there. We already have our flowed solder on this piece of wire. We hold the wire to the joint, and for a bit of security, pop a little bit more flux on there. And we're going to offer the iron, the hot iron, up to this, and the two metals are soldered together. There you go, all done. Good luck. Any questions, ask away. All the best.